How's it? Let's continue. I've got my kettle boiled. Unfortunately, I've run out of milk, so I forgot to get some more. So tonight I'm drinking my tea, black and bitter. Alright. Let's go. Chapter 12. The Wealthy Kivu. This is that ship I was telling you about when I showed you the pictures. 1963 was the best and the worst. The best because Dad pulled me out of school and brought me back to Uganda. I was in Standard 9 and failing most of my classes. I finally asked Dad if I could come home and he agreed. Instead of having a 3-month vacation from boarding school, I had 6 months. It was also the first time I'd travelled on my own, and I found it an easy task of getting through the red tape of crossing borders. I had a bicycle and would cycle to the Kayambura, spending days at a time there with the elephants. It was during this time that I laid one of the elephant myths to rest. I had been led to believe by certain hunters that there were elephant graveyards. These graves were where no one could find them, usually in the middle of some inaccessible jungle. I had found an elephant carcass of an old elephant that had recently died. You could tell he was an old one because his 6th set of molars had worn out. I've seen elephants feeding the old ones, but apparently they get tired of it after 2 weeks, and then the old ones die of starvation. The carcass I found still had the ivory. A herd was approaching in the distance, so I found a good anthill surrounded by the capparis bush, which has many vines, and settled down to watch. The lead female picked up one of the bones, put it in her mouth, rolled it between her molars so that even I could hear it, and then dropped it about 200 meters away. Following members of the herd would then pick up the bones or the tusks and walk with it for a while. By this time I had left my observation post and was following the herd. The carcass of that old male had been spread over a couple of kilometers before they gave it up. Later on in the month, I found that another herd had come by and spread the bones even further, sort of like keeping in touch with the dead. Another myth is that elephants only mate in water due to their weight. This is also not true. I watched as a bull and must came in and joined a herd of elephants. I am always asked how to tell the difference between a male and female elephant, aside from the size and the inevitable 5th leg. A male has a rounded forehead and his belly slopes down towards the back legs. A female's forehead is sharply angled, and her belly is mostly parallel to the ground. Now a bull in must is easy to spot as he drips urine constantly on his back legs. The females will mate with any male, but they much prefer a bull in must. And when he is approaching the herd, the females trumpet, squeal, and do a lot of tummy rumbling. The bull then goes to the back of a female and rumbles something to her, to which she lifts her tail and urinates. He takes a bit of urine in his trunk and can can tell from the smell if she is ready or not. If not, he goes on to the next one and checks her out. When he finds one that is ready, they mate then and there. I studied the behavior of all the animals, but the time spent with elephants was the best time added to my life. Right. And it was the worst because of all the violence. Before I get started on that, I'm going to get my tea. My lips are a bit dry and they keep stumbling. Hope you guys are having a good week so far. It's Wednesday. Halfway there. Nearly to the weekend again, eh? Cheers. Not too bad either. Nice and hot. Alright, so 1963. The worst because of all the violence. Fishing in the Kagera River, I saw thousands of Tutsi floating by. Being far too curious, I went to Miriam Hill Bridge, where they were all being thrown into the river. At first the Hutu were using wire to tie the hands together, before throwing the Tutsi into the river. They then ran out of wire, and so resorted to cutting off the hands before throwing them into the river and letting them drown. The United Nations have a 0% success rate in Africa, and the world really. The United Nations is so flippin' useless. But if you can believe their statistics, they claim that 350,000 Tutsi were killed in a 3-month period. History was repeating itself, and has done so many times since then. The latest being in 1994, when over 1 million were killed in Rwanda due to tribalism. If you guys have ever seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, that captures a bit of the atrocity of tribal conflict. Zanzibar had most of their Arabs killed, and thousands tried to flee into the sea, the morning tide bringing them all back again, dead from the exhaustion, their white robes and belongings littering the beaches for miles. Riots in Mombasa, the Simba rebels in the Congo, all the horror stories of the fleeing Belgians, all led one thing to my mind. I was not going to let my parents die in this manner. It was during this time that I met some of Mike Hoare's mercenaries at Beni in the Congo. Mad Mike Hoare was a legend. There were 6 of them, and they had just done a real number on a group of Simba rebels. The Simbas were terrible. They were brutal and cannibalistic. They used to eat the people that they killed. Anyway, the leader of the mercenaries was a chap by the name of Stain. Showed you a picture of him there in the previous video. Softly spoken, tough as a piece of old leather, and eyes that said it all. I won't go into the atrocities, the numbers, and the MOs, but I was impressed at how calm they could be after what they had just pulled. I left them, and that night, Mom had prepared soup and toast for dinner. That was our normal evening repast. I felt that after the experience of the day, soup and toast. Did I say soap before? Soup and toast were so ordinary, so normal, so everyday. My emotions had been put in a whirlpool, where I would pass this way again. 35 years later, I am sitting at a bar with the boys in Pretoria, South Africa. Everyone is drinking, telling stories, and then this one old man suddenly starts telling his mate about Benny. My ears prick up, and I walk over listening. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I interrupt the old man, saying, "Sir, do you mind if I finish the story?" And I begin to tell the growing number of men what happened back in 1963. The old man is amazed and keeps saying over and over again, "I'd forgotten that detail." His eyes brighten and he points at me. You were the boy. You were the white boy there with the doctor." Emotion fills him, and suddenly he has to get up and go outside. I follow, and he is leaning against the railings of a terrace, tears of past agonies rolling down his cheeks, dripping onto his shirt, no attempt to wipe them away. I too had experienced what the shrinks call post-traumatic stress syndrome, and sometimes it only took a single comment to turn on the taps. We killed 3,000 that afternoon. It was hard for him to get the words out. Then he stood up straight, looked me right in the eye, through his tears, and grabbed my arms. "I've got something for you. You stay right here, and I won't be long." He took off at a fast pace, lighting a cigarette as he left, and then coughed till he got to his car. I stood under a flame tree, That's so flamboyant, and waited. A few of the other men tried to come and make small talk, but I was somewhere else, remembering what had happened that day back in 1963. Stain came back 20 minutes later, and in his hands was a roll of paper. He came right over and spread out a map of the Congo. Right here at this bridge, 20 kilometers north of Fizi, we buried 3 bars of gold. Here's a picture. He pulled out a photograph showing a military convoy crossing a bridge made out of wooden sleepers. Fizi Mission Hospital, 100 meters due west of the stone monument in front of the hospital, is a buried vehicle that we pushed into a large hole and covered up. That one is worth going after. Got to come in from Lake Tanganyika in the Baie de Burton and make it a nighttime raid. Here is another photo of the Kivu. It's on the east side of Bujumbura Harbour. We went down into the engine room and put 5 bars of gold, 20 kilograms each, right here. The Kivu was a lake steamer that the Germans had brought up to Kigoma during the First World War. He went through every detail, even down to what spanner to take with me. How come you never went after it yourself? I asked. Do you remember when we took Stanleyville? Yes, that's when Dr. Carlson, my dad's friend, was killed. Yes, that's right. Well, we blew every bank in town, and it took trucks to take all the stuff we took. There was only one bank we couldn't blow, and here's a picture of it. We split all the loot, and each of us hid stuff all over the place. We were all supposed to go back in 2 weeks, and then we were all pulled out. I've tried to go back several times, and now my wife says that if I try one more time, she will leave me. So you can have it. It's for you. You deserve it. Here, look at these photos. Here's one of the banks we blew in Stanleyville. Buried some of it in 3 drums behind this church. You know the one. Of course you do. He pulled out another photo of a large Catholic church that was very familiar. Behind those outside toilets, but that'll have to be another nighttime operation. Night sights, MP5s, a hit and run. I noticed another photo in his hand and a picture of him when he was a young soldier. Excuse me. That's how I remember you. I pointed at the slim, handsome man in the photo. It was easy to see he was the leader just by the way the others looked at him. No insignias, no medals, only the look of command. He smiled, looking at the photo. Yeah, you can have this one too, eh? Take them all. If it were I'd hit the Kivu first. She's the easiest, and you probably won't even get your hands dirty. Me, I'm too old now. I hope you get it, though. No one will ever think to look there, even if they strip the whole boat. So go for it, and best of luck. Put his hand on my shoulder and stood looking at me. Funny how things change, but they stay the same. With that, he gave me one more pat on the shoulder and left me holding a sheaf of maps and photographs of the Congo War. I took them home and put them in the cupboard. My war days were also over, and I had no intention of getting mixed up in any operations. He was involved in the Rhodesian Bush War. Bill Taylor was. I had no intention of getting mixed up in any operations. My dreams, however, thought otherwise. There were long banana boats with electric motors, 8 of my friends all with MP5s, no moon, night sights, and then always the chase with me waking up sweating and not sleeping the rest of the night. During this time, I had started a carpenter fishing business in Mozambique. I loved the isolation and the primitive lifestyle, but the malaria was of the cerebral type, and if not treated soon enough, would cause death very quickly. We had already had one 20-year-old man in camp that had malaria and refused rest and medication. He died before reaching the other side of the lake in his speedboat. I had the quinine phosphate tablets to take, but had thought it was just the bilharzia playing up. I took the bilharzia medicine, and everything seemed all right for a few days, and I was enjoying my farm. Bilharzia is just like a parasite that you get from water. I've heard it a couple of times. Suddenly, the chills and the fever hit. That means it definitely was malaria. Luckily, Meryl was there, and I told her to get the tablets. I knew also that it was too late for them, but I might still pull through. I explained to her that I would go into a coma, and if I came out of it, I would recover. However, if I didn't, she was to give this message to my boys. Then, for the first time, I told her the whole story of the Kivu, and had her write down the specifics of where the 100 kilograms of gold was. Through her tears, she wrote it all down. I had her read it back to me, and when I was satisfied that she had it right, I went into a coma. For 6 hours I lay on the veranda, shaking from the chills, Meryl sitting next to me. When I opened my eyes, I knew I would make it, and I had also decided to go for the gold. Fred came to visit me shortly after this. He had ridden his motorcycle all the way down from Kigali in Rwanda. When I told him the story of the Kivu, he wanted to go immediately. It was only 9 months later before I had enough money to go up and visit him in Kigali. The idea was that we would go in his Land Cruiser down to Bujumbura in Burundi and get the gold. Easy as that. We spent 3 days getting outfitted for the op. Cutting torches, night sights in case we had to do it during the night, mag lights, the closest thing to a weapon we could take with us, as we'd be crossing borders that searched regularly. On the day, we drove to the Burundi border town of Butare, and out of the blue, Fred decides to call Sadie maybe, an Arab friend of ours in Bujumbura. When Fred finally got through and told Sadie that we were in Butare, he shouted so loud that I could even hear it in the next room. "Don't come! They're killing the convoys! Don't come!" We went and talked to a soldier that had just come in from the countryside. He told us that 34 civilians had been killed in the convoy. He didn't mention how many soldiers had been killed. So we turned back disappointed, but glad to have not gone. Next day, Fred and I took a commuter flight from Kigali to Bujumbura. Immigration gave us a hard time as to why 2 white people wanted to come and holiday in Bujumbura. Sadi miraculously appeared and in 5 seconds had us out in the hot, dry air of Bujumbura. The stress of getting there was over, and that night we slept like the dead. That night the rebels also mortared the town, Fred and I sleeping throughout the whole thing. We found the Kivu, but it had been towed into the harbour and was being refurbished. Sade managed to get us into the harbour, and I recognized it right away from the photo that Stein van Vuren had given me. I fished right off the back of the Kivu, right under the noses of all the soldiers guarding the boats, leg steamers, and fishing boats. I even got a look at the very spot Van Vuren had told me about, but whenever I tried to go downstairs, the soldiers shouted at me. I had Sadi take me to the owner, a very suspicious black man in a suit too small for him, and he basically told us to stay off his boat. Fred and I had to leave after 3 days, and I went home, unsuccessful. Fred came for another visit, and on the veranda of my farm, explained how the Kivu was now in Kigoma. "Let's go, Dad. Sadi has arranged for us to go in at night, and the engineer will let us go on aboard." Sounded too easy. Moz was listening, and as he had never done anything like this before, begged to go. So the 2 of them took off the following morning, and drove up to Mpumalungu in Zambia, took a lake steamer to Kigoma, and for 3 days tried to get into the Kivu, where more repairs were being done. In the end, they came back unsuccessful. I recently spoke to a traveller who had come down from Kigoma by lake steamer. It turns out he came on the Kivu. I still have the small cutting torches, the night glasses. That. Sure. That's a bit more of a heavy chapter. Yeah, that Congo War was no joke. Anyway, you enjoyed, and have a good night. Sleep well. Don't dream of going after hidden gold on your banana boats with MP5s there. What an adventure that would be. Okay, see you tomorrow. Cheers.